If you were to ask me what my favorite video game company is, I would say Rareware. Their games have such a unique style and personality to them. You always know when you're playing a Rareware game. But they still manage to find so much variety in what they do. 3D platformers, 2D platformers, first-person shooters, beat-em-ups, fighting games, racing games. It doesn't matter what genre they decide to tackle because they make it their own. And they've created so many iconic characters over the years. Joanna Dark, Diddy Kong, King K. Rool, Conker, the Battletoads, and of course, Banjo and Kazooie, which are my favorite video game characters.
And I'm not the only one who thinks this way about Rare. Many of their games are considered classics and people absolutely love them. Until they started making games for Xbox.
From that point on, people have become a lot more negative about the games they started making, and that love people had for Rare slowly started to fade away. But to me, Rare on Xbox was the same Rare as on Nintendo. Their games were still unique and filled with personality whilst tackling all these different genres.
So I want to take a look at every game Rare has released on Xbox, giving you a sort of reintroduction to them. I'll go over the gameplay, a bit of their history, what makes them unique and distinctively Rare to me, and hopefully I can get some more people interested in these games because there is something unique and interesting to say about every single one of them.
Their first game to release on Xbox was grabbed by the Ghoulies in 2003. It actually started development for the GameCube though, and is made by the same people who made the Banjo-Kazooie games. Ghoulies is a 3D beat-em-up taking place in a spooky mansion filled with cartoony ghouls and ghosts who you have to defeat on your journey to face off against Baron von Ghoul, the owner of the mansion.
So I kinda wanna get this out of the way before I dive any deeper into this game and what makes it so great. Specifically what makes it so great to me, because Grabbed by the Ghoulies is flat out one of my favorite games Rare has ever made.
The gameplay feels so unique, with some mechanics that I think are genius for a game in this genre. Beat-em-ups and brawlers have never really been my thing, because I find them so repetitive. Mashing buttons and upgrading your moveset for flashier animations doesn't feel that satisfying to me. Grabbed by the Ghoulies though is very different in that aspect. For one, it doesn't even use the buttons. The combat is done by pushing the second control stick in the direction you want to attack in. And I think for veterans of classic beat-em-ups, that is an immediate red flag. Something like performing a combo becomes very limited here. But Grabbed by the Ghoulies uses this self-set limitation to its advantage and asks the player to get creative. The game is filled with challenge rooms where you get tasked to do something within a certain time limit. This can be something as simple as defeat 20 skeletons or find a hidden key in the beginning, but ramps up in difficulty and complexity. How you approach these challenges starts to transform over the course of the game. So now, maybe you'll be asked to kill 20 skeletons, but you can't touch any of them physically. Or you get put in a room with a ton of ghouls, but aren't allowed to kill any skeletons. Or you can only punch 9 times in total, but there are way more than 9 ghoulies to deal with, so you'll have to find another way to complete the challenge. This game is so good at letting the player be creative in how they want to complete these rooms, as most challenges in the game have multiple ways of completing them. Scattered and hidden throughout these rooms are soup cans that can have a variety of effects on you. Some give you extra health, others can speed you up, make you deal more damage, or even give you a miniature version of Cooper to help you out.
Come on, miniature Cooper, get him!
But some can also hinder you. They can slow you down, give you reverse control, zap away your energy for a while. And once these cans are in the arena, they become an obstacle of sorts that you have to maneuver around during battle, since picking them up could mean failing a challenge. But what happens then? What if you aren't able to complete these challenges, either by breaking a rule or running out of time? Well, then the Grim Reaper will show up. The Reaper will be magnetized to you and is able to instantly kill you if you touch him. Once he spawns though, the challenge isn't over yet. You can still complete a challenge once the Reaper appears, and in what I think is a genius move on Rare's part, he is not only able to kill you instantly, but also other ghouls. Let's go back to the challenge where you need to kill ghouls but can't kill skeletons. What if you kill a skeleton on purpose to spawn in the Reaper, and see if you can get him to kill some of the other ghouls before he can get to Cooper? He is basically magnetized to you after all, so maybe I can use that to direct him into the other Ghoulies. I absolutely love the Reaper, man. He is such a unique addition and ironically gives so much life to this game. And I personally just get a big smile on my face every time he kills anything and shreds his scythe like a guitar. There are even some challenges involving him, like are you able to survive in a room with the Reaper for 2 minutes? Besides the gameplay, I just love the spooky aesthetics of Grabbed by the Ghoulies. Rare's personality is here in full force. So much dry humor, funny voices, wacky animations, cartoony energy and references to previous Rare games are all crammed in here, all wrapped up in a fun spooky atmosphere. Grant Kirkhope did the soundtrack, which oozes character and really feels like that bow that ties the whole thing together.
Grabbed by the Ghoulies reminds me so much of these scary books I used to read, like Goosebumps. And I think that's what Rare was going for, at least judging from the storybook presentation, which I honestly think is the weakest part of the game.
The storybook feels cheap and thrown together, but I do think it was always the plan to present the game this way. It probably looked better in their heads though. You can see some of the 2D art of the characters in the game, and I think they look amazing. The storybook presentation probably would have worked better with more fleshed out versions of that art. But that's basically the only real criticism I have for this game. Ghoulies is a classic Rareware game in every sense, and it's just sitting there for more people to experience.
If you want to play Grabbed by the Ghoulies yourself, it's literally playable on every Xbox. It was released on the original Xbox, and that copy is backwards compatible on the 360, the Xbox One, and the Xbox Series X. It was also remastered for Rare Replay, which is available on Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and Game Pass. My hope is that I'll have convinced someone, at least one person out there, to try this wonderful game, because it's genuinely one of the most underrated games I've ever played.
Ghoulies flopped when it came out and kinda left a bad taste in people's mouth for Rare on Xbox. It's become somewhat of a joke in online circles because of exactly that, because it was the first game Rare released on Xbox. You wanna have a real indicator of how few people play this game today? Almost every Xbox achievement I got whilst playing it for this video was a Rare achievement. And those were achievements like encounter every type of ghoulie in the game or complete Grabbed by the Ghoulies. Oh man. I fear Grabbed by the Ghoulies did so much damage to Rare's brand. It wasn't what people were expecting of Rare at the time. It launched on a console that was targeted to mature audiences, whilst the game itself was mostly intended for kids. And there just weren't many people familiar with Rare's work in general on Xbox, so this was a very strange first impression. Being paired with the opening hour of the game that can admittedly be a little slow, since the game is introducing all these mechanics one room at a time before really combining them and making for a dynamic experience.
Thankfully, Rare's next game could potentially fit the mature audience better, whilst also introducing them to one of their classic games, in the form of a remake.
Conker's Bad Fur Day was one of the last games Rare released on Nintendo. It uses the standard child-friendly Rareware aesthetic to subvert expectations, being a mature, foul-mouthed, violent, and gory game. It's also a really funny game with tons of variety in its gameplay. I've always described Conker as a game that doesn't set any limitations for itself. Every idea the game designers had made it into the game in some form. And you just never know what to expect with this game. One moment you're in a standard Rareware level collecting cheese for a rat, and the next moment you're in World War II fighting teddy bears. Or you're in an underground caveman society making a sacrifice for an ancient god to get into a rave club. Or you're in the lair of a giant poop monster singing an opera song.
Conker just does whatever the hell it wants to do, and it's what makes this game so incredibly unique to this day. There are very few games that just dare to be so loose with itself and will just do something for the sake of doing it.
And the original really is one of the best looking games on the platform. The characters are so expressive and the environments are so detailed for such an early 3D console. But sometimes it's easy to forget how rapidly technology was evolving in the late 90s and early 2000s, because I think it's crazy that the remake of Conker's Bad Fur Day was only made 4 years after the original, yet it feels like 15 years have passed. Whatever your opinion is on how it changed the art style of the game, you have to admit this is an impressive looking game for the original Xbox and feels like a real achievement.
But that is a point of contention with people when it comes to the remake. Many feel that the game loses its personality by changing the art style so much. I've never minded it personally, but I do understand why somebody would be disappointed in the new art style.
The original Conker really used that classic cartoony art style to its benefit, and made some of the parts of the game work better. The war setting later in the game, for example, doesn't work as well in the remake, because the rest of the game hasn't had this vibrant, bouncy style to contrast with it. I'd be more harsh on the new art style though, if it didn't look so great in its own right. It's a different art style for sure, and I totally understand why people wouldn't like it as much as the original, but personally, I think the art style is an impressive achievement for the time and in its own right fits the tone of the game very well.
So yeah, despite the new art style, I think the remake is pretty great. What the f?
So, for some reason, a lot of the swear words in the game have been censored with no way to turn them back on. Look, I think it's funnier this way, but I'm not gonna pretend this isn't stupid. Remember when I said Conker is so good in setting no limitations for itself and just does something for the sake of doing? This feels like introducing a limitation. The characters being foul-mouthed is a part of this game's personality, and censoring that seems really counterintuitive. You could say that about the art style too, but the remake offers something new that still fits the tone of the game. If they really wanted to get rid of the swear words, I think they should have made a joke out of it. They added new dialogue of Conker acknowledging that he's in a remake, and they work really well. It would have been very funny if they made a joke out of all the censoring too, like having all the swear words be replaced with overly safe and clean alternative words. And having Conker make a joke out of how everyone has become such a wussy or something before realizing there was supposed to be a P in that word.
I know that would alter the personality even more, but it would still be a fitting replacement instead of just censoring everything. But even then, I don't understand why this was done. The game already has an 18+ rating, and I don't think any fan out there wanted them to actively censor the swear words in the remake.
Besides the audio and visual changes, I find the game to play a lot smoother than the original Conker. The shooter sections are so much better with 2 thumbsticks instead of those clunky C buttons on the N64 controller. I like how I have a lot more movement options when using a melee weapon during regular gameplay, and throughout the entire story little changes have been made to the controls for the variety of different gameplay sections.
All in all though, I think it's a good remake, though I am happy the original is still available on Rare Replay, uncensored and all.
The remake doesn't fully replace the original to me. If anything, it's kind of fun to switch between them to get a different experience each playthrough. I appreciate the remake for what it is. They even added Cooper from Grabbed by the Ghoulies. There he is!
So those were Rare's games on the original Xbox. 2 games in total. Short but sweet. I still absolutely love these games, but it is surprising that they only made 2 games on the Xbox when they made like 10 on the N64? Of course, game development time and costs were rising extremely fast in the early 2000s, and Rare just had to settle in with Xbox as well. But there was actually a 3rd game in production on the original Xbox. Hell, it started production on the GameCube.
Kameo and the Elements of Power might have been the most ambitious game Rare had worked on at that point, and was at the time the longest Rare had ever worked on a single game. They wanted Kameo to be something grand and epic, a huge fantasy tale that took inspirations from Lord of the Rings and combined that with their own Rareware aesthetic.
Years of development time and 3 different consoles it was in production for, including the GameCube, the original Xbox and the 360. Huge budgets from Microsoft to have it be a graphical showcase for the launch of the 360. The first Rare game to have music performed by an orchestra. Hell, the first Rare game to be in HD. People tend to forget how much work Rare has put into this game because people also tend to forget that this game even exists.
Out of all games Rare has made during their time at Xbox, this feels the least known by far. And the title really doesn't help with that. Kameo and the Elements of Power is such a generic name for a fantasy game. Rare has so many games with great titles, both before and after this one, so it's really strange that this name was chosen here. But at the end of the day, what matters is the game itself, and the game is pretty good. It's not my favorite game Rare has ever made, and it does have some rough edges, but overall, Kameo feels like what Rare wanted it to be. It makes you go on a sprawling adventure through a warring fantasy land. Kameo can transform into different creatures that you can find one by one during the game. This does kinda make the opening of the game feel a little slow like Ghoulies was, but once you have a few creatures to switch between during the game, it becomes more and more fun. Creatures like Pummelweed, who is a brawling plant that is great at beating enemies up. Major Ruin, a stone hedgehog who can transform into a spiky ball to launch himself clearing slopes. Ash, a dragon that can light enemies on fire and can shoot fireballs at exploding barrels, and many, many more. I think everyone who plays this game will come out of it having a different favorite transformation. And you can all give them so many different skins, which is a really cool feature. Like, how many people even know that you can basically play as Mumbo Jumbo from Banjo Kazooie? The transformations can all be upgraded by using these fruits that you can find all across the land, by looking for hidden spots, solving puzzles, defeating certain enemies, or completing a side quest.
Kameo actually really reminds me of Star Fox Adventures, or as some of you know it, Dinosaur Planet. And just like that game, you explore a vast land, enter temples, enter villages, solve quests, solve puzzles, and collect different types of collectibles in the typical Rareware fashion.
And just like Star Fox Adventures / Dinosaur Planet, Kameo feels and plays like a Zelda game at times. And that's not a bad thing at all. In fact, Kameo might do it a little better than Star Fox Adventures, since that game being changed from Dinosaur Planet to Star Fox really left it feeling unfocused. If you're a fan of that game though, I highly recommend you play Kameo. The reviews were pretty positive about it at the time, citing its great presentation as one of the highlights. The Xbox 360 was the first HD console on the market, and this was a launch game, so to some people, this game was their first introduction to HD graphics. And yeah, Kameo makes a great first impression on that front. The environments are incredibly detailed and atmospheric for 2005, and the battlefields are huge with hundreds of orcs and trolls all roaming around and battling humans. The budget Microsoft gave the game can really be felt throughout, and that Lord of the Rings feeling Rare's going for is honestly pretty well realized here. There were multiple times during my playthrough for this recording where I was just kinda soaking in how pretty the environments are. I absolutely love the villages. Every single one has such a different aesthetic and structure to it, and they all feel alive. You can see certain villagers moving about their day, going to their houses at night for sleep, and doing their day jobs once the sun rises. There's a sense of a living, breathing community here that I like a lot. At least as much of a sense as they could achieve in 2005. And the music in these villages is really nice, giving a refreshing peacefulness against the huge epic themes of the rest of the game. Kameo was composed by Steve Burke, using a live orchestra. And whilst it's not my favorite Rare soundtrack, it is very effective for this game. The music is so good at getting you in a certain mood. When you're battling on a huge battlefield, balls of fire falling from the sky, soldiers and orc around you fighting, tanks moving about, and that score kicks in, you get really hyped up. And again, the huge epic battle themes isn't the only music the game has to offer. I find the soundtrack is also really good at atmospheric and moody music. Whether it's the theme of a mystical magic user, or the sound of a snow-covered village built around a huge tree, It's a soundtrack that works wonderfully whilst playing the game. It's just not something I would listen to on its own, like I do with the Banjo Kazooie or the Donkey Kong Country soundtracks.
Look, Kameo isn't my favorite Rare game, but it is good. There is a lot to like here, and it's an experience I can absolutely recommend to people, because if anything, I want more people to play it. Kameo does not deserve to be as forgotten as it is, because at its core, it's a fun, grand, unique adventure game with a couple of rough edges, but still achieves what it sets out to do. Kameo wasn't the only game Rare released on the launch of the 360 though. They also released a new game in the Perfect Dark series.
After Rare made GoldenEye, they lost the rights to making James Bond games, so they just made their own James Bond instead. Perfect Dark takes place in the future where secret agent Joanna Dark is sent out by a secret service called the Carrington Institute to battle a company called Datadyne, who are harboring alien technology in an effort to become the most powerful company in the world.
So originally I had a bit here about how I never really liked GoldenEye or Perfect Dark, but whilst I was playing specifically Perfect Dark for this video, it finally clicked. I still don't love it, but I have a lot more respect for it now. It's a pretty great fast-paced shooter with a lot of fun weapons to use. It has a great variety of levels, and the story is interesting with a little touch of camp to it. I'm still a little unsure on if I like the objective-based gameplay or not, but Perfect Dark is alright in my book. So I'm very interested in more of this world and these characters. Well, in 2005, that's what I would get with Perfect Dark Zero, a prequel game that doesn't include aliens, has very few characters from the original game, and the characters it does have act completely different. Okay, but maybe the gameplay is improved from the original, or is it at least fun? No.
Perfect Dark Zero is the only game in this video that I genuinely don't like. It's just such a sluggish, awkward feeling shooter that almost comes across as unfinished at times. Most of the environments are so empty and desolate feeling. The levels always feel like levels to me, never like a real place you're roaming around in. It's very easy to get lost or walk in circles since so many levels consist of copy-pasted hallways. There are some moments though where I found the outdoor environment showed off some good graphics for 2005, but overall it's very disappointing from the otherwise excellent work Rare has done with the environments in their games. The enemies are so bullet spongy, and they might have the slowest death animations I've ever seen in a game, sometimes making it hard to see if they have even died yet or not. The story here is kinda awkwardly delivered. Cutscenes are so poorly executed and fail to communicate what is even going on most of the time. There are also some terrible weapons in this, like what is this insane zoom on the sniper rifle? How am I supposed to use this? And I couldn't shake this feeling I had that Perfect Dark Zero really wants to be like Halo with the dual wielding and the vehicle sections. The game has some good individual music tracks by David Kleinig, who did a pretty good job on the soundtrack despite the rest of the game being so, you know, Perfect Dark Zero, yet sometimes it feels like it doesn't really fit what's actually happening. I want you to imagine for a second what music is playing over this scene. A tense prison escape scene, guns a-blazing, shooting your way out with a tank. You got it? Alright, because this is the song that plays during this section. Still, I don't want to undersell the soundtrack because it is easily the best part of this game. It just feels like the gameplay and the tone of the soundtrack don't always match.
Perfect Dark Zero is just such a mess. It's unpolished, lacks vision, and I can't really recommend it to anyone. I think fans of the original won't like it, and there are so many better first-person shooters out there that this really isn't worth your time. It's not like the worst game ever made or anything, but I do think it's the worst game Rare has ever made. And I wonder if working on two games for the launch of the 360 made both games suffer a bit. Like, would Kameo have its rough edges if Rare didn't have to work on Perfect Dark Zero? And if that's the case, I wish they didn't make it, because it's overall just a waste of time. And despite having made 4 games for Xbox at this point, Rare wasn't finding any success. They didn't really have a release with a lot of eyes on it ever since their last project at Nintendo. But that would all change at the end of 2006, with their first hit game on Xbox, Viva Pinata.
I think it's pretty easy to see why this game was such a success. It has such an inviting personality with its amazing use of colors, a huge variety of appealing character designs, a relaxing atmosphere, and it's just overall fun and addicting. And this is a title that instantly sticks in your head once you hear it, Viva Pinata. It's a very unique name, unlike Kameo and the Elements of Power. Viva Pinata takes place in a garden that you have to build up and maintain to attract wild pinata. And having certain pinata, plants, terrain, decorations, or food in your garden can attract other, more valuable pinata. The whole game revolves around this system of getting pinatas of high values to sell them off, use them to attract other pinatas into your garden, or send them to parties. But if I'm being fully honest here, this is where me and this game don't always gel.
Don't get me wrong though, I think Viva Pinata is great and I absolutely love it, but the main point of always having different pinata in your garden has always been my least favorite part about it.
I love collecting the pinatas, giving them names, making little houses for them, growing crops and flowers, making my garden look pretty and seeing the pinata roam around in it. But the game has some pretty strict limits on how many pinata and objects in general for that matter you can have in your garden. Viva Pinata really wants to be a management tycoon game with a relaxing garden atmosphere, and in that aspect it really works.
There's just always been this kind of desire within me to have Viva Pinata be more of a farming simulator instead of what it is in its current form. I just kinda wanna have all the pinata in one place instead of having to say goodbye to them because, I don't know, it makes me kinda sad. But let me stop dreaming about what I want this game to be and focus on what it is because it's great. It's one of Rare's best even. There's a reason why I've done multiple playthroughs of it.
The greatest strength of Viva Pinata is its presentation. The phenomenal score by Grant Kirkhope, the cute designs and animation for the pinata, the vibrant colors, the pleasant sound design, everything is just so well presented to the player in a way that's inviting and so easily grows into a feeling of coziness. And Rare's slow approach to the beginning of their games is actually really beneficial here, because it fits the tone and vibe of the game so well. This is a slow game at times, but in a good way. The kind of way that makes you relax and makes you actively want to do things at a slower pace. The side effect to that is that there is so much to learn. Frankly, I feel I don't understand all of it yet, even after multiple playthroughs. But the weird thing is, I don't see that as a bad thing at all. I always discover something new about it that makes me appreciate and understand it more, making it feel like Viva Pinata is just this endless box of surprises sometimes. It continues to make me want to come back to the game over time, and it makes it feel like it's always refreshing itself.
One of the best games I ever played.
Oh my god! And graphically, the game has held up so incredibly well. It's 17 years old at this point, and it has barely aged a day. I'm still in awe at how good the pinatas look. Their little paper effect is so cool looking and so impressive for 2006.
Like I said, this game was a real hit for Rare. It got its own party spin-off game. It was the first Rare game to be ported to PC, and it even got its own TV show. It got a sequel in 2008 called Trouble in Paradise, though I use the word sequel very loosely here. It's more so a 2.0 update. Still, if you want to play Viva Pinata, I would recommend this version because it's the more fuller, complete version of what Viva Pinata is and has to offer. Trouble in Paradise adds a ton of new pinata and 2 zones where you can set up traps to capture wild pinata instead of attracting them to your garden. But that's beginning to become a little bit of a pattern with Rare, not really doing sequels. Instead of doing a Conker sequel, they do a remake. Instead of a Perfect Dark sequel, they do a prequel. And instead of making a Viva Pinata sequel, they do an updated version. But their next game would be a sequel, no strings attached. And it would be about my favorite video game characters, Banjo and Kazooie.
This is by far the hardest game for me to talk about, because I have two sides when it comes to nuts and bolts. The side of me that is a fan of Rare games, and the side of me who is a Banjo-Kazooie fan. They both have wildly different opinions on this game for completely different reasons.
I'm going to let both of these sides talk individually of each other, giving them their own section of the video to say whatever they want to say about it. So first off is the Rareware fan side in me, who absolutely loves this game.
Nuts and Bolts continues with Rare's innovative and creative thinking by again letting the player choose its own way of how to play the game. The vehicle builder is so incredibly versatile and easy to use. I have so much respect for how well this builder is done and haven't seen it done better in any game I've ever played. Tears of the Kingdom has a vehicle building mechanic that is very similar in nature to how Nuts and Bolts wants the player to interact with its game design. And there is no doubt in my mind that Nuts and Bolts was at least mentioned during the production. But I also think Nuts and Bolts does it a little better, at least when it comes to the vehicles and building them. I'm not going to let this become a review on Tears of the Kingdom, but you have so much more control and freedom when making something in Nuts and Bolts. Vehicles and their physics feel sturdy and solid, with a sense of infinite possibility. People have managed to make some pretty insane things in this builder, and the game actively encourages this experimentation. Seriously, I have nothing but good things to say about the actual vehicle building mechanic. I think it's so well put together in every single way, and I think the team who made it should be praised for what they've managed to achieve here. I also think a lot of the presentation of Nuts and Bolts is really solid. This goes back to Rare's sense of personality, which is again in full force here. The little sitcom intros log plays as you first enter a level, the jiggy animation for transitioning between screens, the cozy atmosphere in Showdown Town which transitions to night over the course of the game. Every level in the game has such a distinct personality from each other, and what I've always been very impressed by is that each one encourages different approaches to the way you build your vehicles. One level might be very vertical in nature, so the player starts to think about building helicopters, yet it is never a requirement. There is still a way to fully reach the top by driving with a regular vehicle instead of making a new one, but it is presented in a way that makes the player actively think about how to approach challenge differently. It's like this in every single world, so the game keeps you invested in what you're doing and how you choose to play it. The missions also have a similar approach. Basically every mission in the game finds a new way to make the player think differently, and combine that with what I said about the level design, and you have a game that always keeps you feeling creative.
But what about the art style, which a lot of people seem to hate? My Banjo-Kazooie fan side in me will have more to say about it, but I do think it fits this specific game very well.
The blocky character designs with smooth edges is one that I still find to be very unique, and it gives the game a lot of character. I have trouble imagining the original Banjo-Kazooie character designs driving around in Showdown Town. I don't think it would fit at all. Speaking of Showdown Town, what a phenomenal hub world. It feels huge, but always stays incredibly fun to explore. There are so many hidden secrets to find in the different areas that the game slowly lets the player explore over the course of the game. Finding new vehicle parts hidden away in the town is really fun and satisfying, and honestly gave me the feeling of the original Banjo games a lot of the time. The soundtrack, again by Grant Kirkhope, is fantastic, though this was sadly the last soundtrack he composed for Rareware. Still, he did an incredible job giving the music of Nuts and Bolts so much variety. From the rock and roll energetic main theme that almost sounds like a garage band jamming out, to the orchestral sound of the bustling grand civilized city, and atmospheric eerie tracks that almost sound like a Tim Burton film. think it's one of the best soundtracks Kirkhope has ever done. And for his final soundtrack at Rare, he sure went out with a bang.
Before I let the Banjo-Kazooie fan side talk, I do want to say one final thing. Please play this game. The vehicle building mechanic is genuinely fantastic, and it's a shining example of how Rare was and continues to be innovative. Sit with it for a while and let yourself interact and play around with all these mechanics, and I'll guarantee you'll have a good time with it. Nuts and Bolts is genuinely one of the most misunderstood games I've ever played, which brings me to its biggest problem. The biggest flaw of Nuts and Bolts. Why is this a Banjo game?
The Banjo-Kazooie fan in me hates this game, and I will never understand why they thought it was a good choice to make this the next mainline Banjo game. And don't try to spin this on me as not being a mainline Banjo game. It continues the story from 2E, and Rare has always said this was the third Banjo game. But why would you take these characters on this route? What about these character designs, their world, their previous games, just anything about them makes you think they would fit this game concept? Why not make this its own new IP? It's not like Rare has anything against making new IPs, frankly they prefer it. And even then, Rare has different IPs that fit this game concept better. What is the benefit here of duct taping these characters onto this game? Sure, marketability, but come on, this game did not sell well, and I completely understand why. I frankly think it would have sold better if it wasn't a Banjo game.
Look, I get the desire of not just wanting to make the same game again. To not just make another 3D collectathon that just adds a few moves and worlds, but this is way too far in the other direction. There's a lot of good examples of franchises doing something new and different while still feeling true to the original personality and style. I'm not against doing something new and different with Banjo and Kazooie. But this is not doing something new with Banjo and Kazooie. This is doing something new and adding Banjo and Kazooie into that.
Rare didn't make this game because they thought it would make for a good Banjo game. They made it because they thought a game where building your own vehicles for challenges could be really fun and innovative, but that has nothing to do with the Banjo franchise. Some of you might know this, but Resident Evil 4 was in development hell for a long time. During that production, they felt the game was starting to deviate so much from what Resident Evil is that they just decided to take out the Resident Evil characters and make it its own thing entirely. Thus, Devil May Cry was born, whilst Resident Evil 4 restarted production to make something that would redefine the Resident Evil franchise, while still feeling true to the originals.
Just imagine for a second that they didn't do that. What if this ended up being Resident Evil 4 and we never got the actual Resident Evil 4? How do you think Resident Evil fans would feel about that? Because I think that would have killed the Resident Evil franchise.
I see a lot of similarities to the development of Resident Evil 4 and Devil May Cry when thinking about how Nuts and Bolts ended up. And I wish Rare had taken some notes from that. Because when you look at how they changed the character designs, it's obvious these characters never fit this style of game. Banjo's world and characters focus on round circles and smoothness. This is all completely thrown out of the window for something that, again, admittedly fits the style of this game better, but shouldn't that tell you enough? If you have to change everything about these characters to make them fit this game concept, maybe, just maybe, you shouldn't put them in. In all its fairness though, there are some designs that I actually really like. I think Gruntilda looks great in this art style, and I love the skeleton head and the robotic body look. Seriously, this might be my favorite Gruntilda design out there. And I vastly prefer Humba Wumba here to her old look. I also really love Locke's design, which is admittedly a design original to this game, but I still wanted to mention it.
My feelings on Nuts and Bolts are complicated. Part of me loves it, part of me hates it, but I do hope more people give it a try and form their own opinion on it, because it at the very least deserves that. So far Microsoft had just let Rare do whatever they want, which is pretty easy to see, but that would all change after Nuts and Bolts.
Aside from Viva Pinata, Rare had been losing so much money, and Microsoft started seeing their $375 million investment into the company as kind of a loss. But since they had worked with Nintendo so closely and the Wii was becoming a huge hit for the company, Microsoft tasked Rare with making the Xbox version of Mii's and to have a Wii Sports kind of game to use those characters for the upcoming Kinect. Yeah, Rare were the ones who made the Microsoft avatars. Most of this video has been me defending Rare on Xbox because I think their game output on the brand is overhated. And no game release of theirs has been hated as much as the Kinect Sports games have. There's no going around it. These games are complete clones of Wii Sports, and they were games Rare were not planning to make, but were tasked to.
So am I really going to defend these? Am I going to defend something from Rare that Rare themselves did not want to make? Yes!
Because for what the Kinect Sports games are, these are actually pretty good. They achieved something that's pretty hard to do, honestly. Kinect Sports so obviously takes huge notes from Wii Sports. Nobody will deny that. But for how much of Wii Sports DNA is in the Kinect Sports games, they truly managed to play nothing like Wii Sports. They are a lot of fun, and they feel like a good workout. Kinect Sports is really physical, way more physical than the Wii Sports games are. I think it was a wise decision of Rare to base the Kinect Sports games around these Olympic type of events, because the game succeeds in making you feel like a bit of an athlete. Where the Kinect Sports games shine is how they manage to distinct themselves from Wii Sports. From the way they play, the Olympic game setting, and the presentation of the sports themselves.
I have this very specific memory of Kinect Sports from when I was a kid. Me and my dad were doing this marathon event, and I was just jumping with energy and excitement over how much fun I was having. After the marathon was over, I was jumping up and down saying again before turning to my dad, who was sweating like an otter, completely red, holding the table for support, gasping for air and saying, "No, I'm never playing that game again." It was really sweet of him to just finish the marathon with me, even though it was so difficult for him to play.
I really like Kinect Sports. It has a soft place in my heart as I have a lot of good memories from it, and I think it achieves what it sets out to be. It's a sport game that actually makes you feel like you're playing a sport. Though I'm not gonna sit here and pretend this is a good Rareware game. They might as well not have made it, honestly. There's barely anything in here that I can connect back to Rare. Their personality isn't in it at all, and having it be a Wii Sports clone by design really limits their option for their trademark outside of the box creative thinking and genre bending. The treatment a lot of the games in this video get, I find unfair, but with the Kinect Sports games, I can at least get where people's dislike of them are coming from. There is a bigger picture problem here, with the Kinect and Kinect Sports games generally being considered the start of a sort of dark age of Xbox. Also, real quick, I did not play Kinect Sports Rivals for this video because I would have to get an Xbox One, an Xbox One Kinect, and Kinect Sports Rivals just to play that game for an hour and say, yep, that sure is a Kinect Sports game.
Are the Kinect Sports games something I can recommend? No, not per se, but if you're looking for a fun workout, this will absolutely do the trick. After the Kinect Sports days were over, Rare needed a palate cleanser, and that's what they would release on their 30th anniversary.
Rare Replay might be one of the best releases Rare has ever done. It's a collection of most of the games Rare has made during their 30 years as a company. There are some understandable exclusions like the Nintendo games and GoldenEye, which they couldn't get because of the James Bond license, but besides that, most of their output is here, with all of the games being remastered. A total of 30 games are in the collection, and the game retailed at launch for $30. That is just $1 per game, which is an insane deal, especially when most of the games are enhanced. They've added widescreen support, 4K resolution, better frame rate, modernized control schemes in some games like Jet Force Gemini and Perfect Dark. And the games aren't all that's included. Documentary videos on each game, tons of archival sketches and design documents, footage of cancelled games. There is so much to discover here, making it really feel like the Rareware museum that they present it as. And yeah, even though this is a compilation collection disc, Rare has still managed to fully bring their sense of personality and uniqueness to the damn menus.
This to me is the gold standard of how you do a compilation release. And if you have an Xbox One or Series X, this is a must-have game. I have some small gripes with it though, nothing too major, but something that has always kind of puzzled me is, why is Conker Live and Reloaded not on this?
The original is on here, like I mentioned before, but not the remake, and I see no reason why it's not included. The Game Boy Colors and Advance games aren't here either. I might talk about these some other day in their own video, because they have their own interesting quirks and history to them. And the behind the scenes videos I mentioned are all locked behind how many achievements you can get in all the games. And I feel kinda conflicted about this system. On the one hand, it is a great reward for interacting with Rare's catalog of games and incentivizes you to try every game in the collection. On the other hand, I kinda just wanna watch these videos, man. Thankfully you can find all of them pretty easily online, so it's not the biggest deal in the world, but I don't know, I still feel kinda weird about the system. Rare's 40th anniversary is coming up, and I would love it if they did a re-release of Rare Replay with some extra games included. Hell, they actually recently added GoldenEye to the digital version, after finally having sorted out the license with the James Bond franchise. So I think it'd be great if they could turn this into the full Rareware catalog. Minus the Nintendo games of course, which are never going to be included. All I'm saying is, Nintendo releases a compilation of 3 Mario games for $60, and they feel less remastered than Rare's game compilation with 30 games for $30.
Rare Replay is just so incredibly good, man. It brought back a ton of goodwill and respect for the company after the Kinect Sports games. And that goodwill and respect continued with their next game, which ended up becoming their biggest game ever, Sea of Thieves. So I have something to confess here. This was the only game of Rare on Xbox that I had not played before writing this video. I'm not really into multiplayer games like this. I do like the occasional Splatoon match or Super Smash Bros. Battle, but I mostly enjoy single player games. Something as big as Sea of Thieves really isn't my usual cup of tea. But on the positive side, this way I can give a sort of first impression on this game and where it is now, because from what I understand, Sea of Thieves is a pretty different game now from when it launched.
Before I really dive deep into this game though, get it? I want to quickly shout out the box art. Genuinely one of my favorite box arts of all time. I fell in love with it the moment I first saw it. It's such a clever visual and I just can't get enough of it. And man, Sea of Thieves is such a great title. I can't think of a better name for an online pirate game by Rare. Speaking of which, Rare finally made a pirate game. Rare has a very long history with wanting to make a pirate game. Banjo and Kazooie was originally a pirate-themed game. There's also a ton of pirate imagery in the Donkey Kong Country series, and they just have a lot of pirate characters in their previous games. Rare has always loved pirates, and it's really cool to finally see them having made an entire game based around it, and seeing it be such a smash hit for them. And after having finally played it together with my friend Nolan, he has a YouTube channel by the way called Power Palette that he runs with his buddy Matt. And you should absolutely check it out because they create some amazing videos and are highly underrated.
You are now old.
He's now old. Oh, this is awesome. Hold on.
I think I understand what made Sea of Thieves so successful. Playing this game with friends is wonderfully chaotic.
Pick up Sapphire Mermaid Gem. Nolan, I have a Sapphire Mermaid Gem. Ah!
Frantic.
Bring my children well.
Ah!
And very funny.
I'm just hearing your character go.
And I'm just like, oh, what's happening?
It's the kind of game where you create the stories yourselves by just experiencing and playing the game with each other. Stealing from another person's ship and laughing over it.
He's gonna get all the way to his quest point, and he's going to be like, wait, where is it?
Dude, we're slowly just gonna see him reappear in the horizon with a vengeance.
we probably should have left a long time ago.
The panic that sets in once a huge sea creature begins to hover around your ship.
What are you shooting at? What's happening? What? Whoa. What do you mean, giant shark?
You are right. You are right.
Oh.
Or discovering something really amazing together.
Whoa.
Sea of Thieves kind of feels like a bonding experience at times. And I know this is gonna sound cheesy, but Sea of Thieves really makes you feel like a pirate. It even feels like a pirate simulator at times. The way you have to get the water off your ship and repair it during the battles, load a cannonball into the cannon after every single shot, having to raise the sails or lower the anchor yourself during every voyage, look at the map and figure out for yourself where on the island something is, it really sells that feeling of living a pirate's life whilst traversing the dangerous sea. And that dangerous sea, by the way, looks stellar. There were so many times where I would just sit and stare at the ocean whilst we were sailing and looking at how pretty it was. The rendering of the waves themselves, how the light reflects off of them, how you and the boat interact with that water, it's all incredibly well done. This is without a doubt the best looking and most impressive water simulation I have ever seen in any game. And the rest of the game also looks great. The art style has this real crookedness to it that fits the pirate theme very well. Sea of Thieves is also phenomenal at creating a variety of atmospheres. The sea itself can feel ominous and scary, like it has eyes watching you, but can also feel calm, serene and pleasant without a care in the world. The soundtrack by Robin Beanland is also phenomenal, feeling extremely adventurous and taking more than one cue from the Pirates of the Caribbean soundtracks, but I guess that's to be a little expected. And Rare has really ditched their slow opening approach to the game. Sea of Thieves just throws you in and says, go on an adventure, and I love that.
Sea of Thieves really impressed me on so many levels, but a strange thing started to happen whilst I was playing it with Nolan. I forgot that this was a Rare game.
I guess you could say that's a good thing, since I truly got immersed at some points and stopped thinking about it. But the usual Rareware humor, personality and references to their previous work is surprisingly minimal here. Not that it's not there at all, it's just a lot more in the background than it has been in previous games. Don't let that take away how great of a game this is though, because it truly is something special.
But if Sea of Thieves even looks remotely interesting to you, get some friends together and play this game because you'll have a blast. And those were, at the time of recording this, all games Rare released on Xbox. So what is Rare up to now? Well, their next game, Overworld, has kind of been in development hell for years now, and has restarted production 3 times. On the positive side though, Sea of Thieves is still being regularly updated and has thousands of players every day.
They've also started outsourcing some of their IPs to other companies, like Killer Instinct and Battletoads. There's also a new Perfect Dark game coming out that's not made by Rare. Banjo and Kazooie were introduced as DLC fighters in Super Smash Bros. In 2019, which was surreal to see as a Rare fan. Ever since then, some of Rareware's games have been available on Nintendo Switch. Banjo-Kazooie, GoldenEye, and recently Jet Force Gemini have all become playable on the N64 NSO service, so these games are now playable portably for the very first time.
And I shouldn't forget to mention Playtonic. Playtonic is made by ex-Rare employees, and they've made 2 games so far in the style of older Rare games. The first one was Yooka-Laylee in the style of the Banjo-Kazooie games. And the second one was Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair, in the style of the Donkey Kong Country games.
Playtonic has also started a pretty successful publishing division called Playtonic Friends, helping bring out games like Demon Turf, Little Gator Game, and the Blossom Tail games. They've been doing pretty well since they started business in 2014, and I look forward to seeing what their next game might be. But it's mostly been kinda quiet for Rare fans, unless you really like Banjo-Kazooie merch, because they've basically been releasing new merch every month for what feels like years now. Their 40th anniversary is coming up somewhat soon though, so who knows, maybe they'll have something special in store for that.
But for now, these were the games Rare released on Xbox, and I can recommend you play most of them. They at least all have something interesting about them. An interesting mechanic, an interesting style choice, an interesting world. All of these games are unique, and not only for Rareware's history, but for the gaming landscape in general. Except for Perfect Dark Zero. Maybe Maybe don't play that one.
Apologize for the delay in reconnecting the power supply. Normal service will be resuming shortly.
Hi everyone, Nathaniel Bandy here, and today I want to tell you about my favorite game of all time, Grabbed by the Ghoulies. This has the best graphics, gameplay, character designs, and environments you'll ever see in video games. No game, and I mean no game, has ever come close to ever matching the sheer quality of Grabbed by the Ghoulies. The soundtrack is by Grant Kirkhope, and as we all know, he's the most skilled musician of all time. Heck, I'd say even better than Mozart or Beethoven. Just put any song by those artists next to Grabbed by the Ghoulies, and it's not gonna stack up. Now, of course, I have to mention how phenomenal the box art is. It feels very special to hold something in my hand that rivals the artfulness of Mona Lisa. In fact, I shouldn't even be allowed to touch it. I, Nathaniel Bandy, think that you should absolutely go play this game, and that is my own self-made opinion. And I swear to God, Mallard did not set me up to try to convince people to play it. None of this was his idea. He's not forcing me. No, he would never do that. No, he's a great guy. I just love this game to death. As you cannot tell, I'm smothered in it. I absolutely adore this game. It's like the world's greatest game of all time, isn't it? It is! Okay, was that good?
Not good enough.
That wasn't good enough?
Sorry, Nathan.
What do you mean? No! No!